Welcome to Leadr Podcast, the ultimate destination for Medtech insights, leadership inspiration, and the latest innovation. I'm Steph Pliha, founder of Tribe Agency and your host for Leadr Podcast. Welcome to episode 10 of Leadr Podcast. Join us as Wesley Jones, CEO of Vonova and innovator in medical device engineering, joins us and shares his journey from UCLA Biodesign Fellowship to transforming neurology with a non-invasive catheter platform. Dive into our discussion on the future of brain-computer interfaces and so much more. Let's get into it. I am so excited to have my next guest speaker on, who's actually, he doesn't know this yet, but he is number 10 on Leadr Podcast. So it's the perfect opportunity to bring on one of my absolute favorite clients in the medtech startup space. I want to introduce you to Wesley Jones, CEO of Vonova. So welcome to Leadr Podcast.
Pleasure to be on the podcast and get on the top 10.
Yay. I know. It's crazy. It's been a little bit of a passion project. I'm getting better at it. I mean, if I go back and watch the first episode, it's very different. But I know this has been a long time coming for us to do this podcast. And you have such a great cause that you are running up the hill. And I want to make sure you get the due time for it. So let's start with that. Let's start with how we know each other. And although we haven't known each other very long, we did kind of originate this relationship through a client relationship. So Vonova and Wesley, we met through, I think maybe LinkedIn was our original contact. I can't remember.
Yes. Yeah. LinkedIn, I believe.
And we had a quick chat and I just loved your energy. I just loved what you were wanting to do. And your background is incredible, which we're going to get into. But your background and just your approach to life, the fact that you're in San Diego and I'm in Newport, it just all kind of worked. And we've been working with you since January, maybe December, a little bit earlier, maybe. But all that being said, we're thrilled to have you as a client. And moreover, I'm excited to have you as a guest today. So I do want to give you the time to not only talk about your background, since this is a leadership podcast, I always try to highlight leadership and scale it for others. And then also I want to bring in Vonova because I think you're doing great things there. And I definitely want to give our audience the perspective on your company. So let's start with your background. What is your kind of origin story for leadership? And then we'll get into Vonova.
Certainly. Well, it's great to be here, Stephanie. And yeah, I think it's been 5-6 months since we met. And
has it?
It's been an absolute pleasure. Really helping take our pre-seed company into the seed phase, polishing up our story, our framing. Couldn't be more thankful and impressed with your work. About me, so my core is I'm an engineer. I'm a mechanical engineer. I spent a decade in industry developing catheters and system devices for electrophysiology and the treatment of heart arrhythmia, specifically atrial fibrillation. So these are catheters that use your venous system to get into your heart without needing open chest surgery to then identify where irregular heart activity is coming from. So these diseased, leaky cells, and then either removing or ablating them. Those devices have expanded the cardiac ablation market to over $4 billion today. And that is really a core piece of the foundation of my background, which will lead into Vonova later. But as an engineer, I like to build, I like to solve problems. And I began my career in medical devices because I originally wanted to go to medical school. Like many, undergrads, seeing what they have and opportunities in front of them. And your perspective is, I want to help people. And you see your job options and you say, okay, I want to be a doctor. So went and did the MCAT, applied, didn't get in right out the gate. So I got a job online with Medtronic. Medtronic in San Diego that recently acquired a company called Ablation Frontiers. Associate manufacturing is where I began. On the line, in production, worrying about the quality and, the profits really of how to get these products to market in a sustainable business model with production. And learned a lot through that, little problems at a time. And that ultimately led me to a desire to get more into research and development. Because in manufacturing, for those who don't know, you're given these frozen designs that are validated first, spent millions of dollars to validate these designs. And you in manufacturing, your job is to figure out how to not alter the design, but make sure that this device is manufacturable consistently with quality, with no issues and potential for complications to the patient. So you are the Band-Aid superhero. There's no fixing the pipe. You have to figure out how to Band-Aid it. Very challenging, very demanding, and learned a lot through that. I'm very appreciative to all those in operations from that experience. But the reality is the bigger problems, the root cause of some of those manufacturing challenges you experience in that field are originating in research and development. So true to, wanting to solve problems, moving on into R&D and at a startup. So going from Medtronic to a startup, looking for those bigger problems. And that's really where I began my growth as a leader. Having the operations experience, working with, up to 50 operators and 5 lines in charge of all that, building the trust across silos from engineering to operation, operators who are actually building it, for 10, 12 hours a day. And then taking that experience into R&D, and then now developing that leadership with multiple engineers of different specialties, of different backgrounds. A software engineer is very different than a mechanical engineer, than an electrical engineer. But through all that, I really appreciated and was always my goal was how to enable all of us to fulfill our purpose and to drive towards achieving the company's objectives, which is our why. That's why people show up to work every day. And so in R&D at Acutus, I grew from catheter engineer, which was not my favorite title, because on your business card, everybody would say, "What's a senior catheter engineer?" Like, well, senior heart catheter engineer. I'm trying to, no, just kidding.
Yeah.
But, I grew from that role into a systems program manager. So because I had the knack or interest or intrinsic motivation of bringing multiple specialties together to find the right people to solve the right problems and build those teams, became more of a program operation, which was hard for me because I love to build with my hands, but you could build a lot faster and more efficient if you could bring synergies together with multiple specialties. And that's, Acutus went through our 510K. We got FDA approval, worried about the lights going off. I kind of enjoy the struggle and the challenge of those, not having everything figured out for you. There's no fallback. There's either win or lose. It's kind of the environment I like to work in personally, I discovered. And after getting through our 510K and FDA and onto our IPO, I liked it so much and was so inspired from my mentors at Acutus, including Dave Bringle, who is my boss and COO of Acutus, motivated me to get my MBA. He said, "Hey, you got great, instincts here. You might want to consider actually learning a bit." And as an engineer, and this is complete disclosure and transparency, I don't know about say for all engineers, but you think quite a bit. There's definitely a piece of ego involved with like solving all these great problems, right? And I definitely at that age was thinking I knew 90% of what I needed to know in the medical device industry. And then I went and got my MBA and realized I knew like 1%. And in that experience, I just kind of pursued the next opportunity to continue to grow and to learn as a continuous learner. And that's where I ran into my co-founder, who I'm now married to, in the company of Vonova that we can get into in a bit.
So you met at UCLA Biodesign. Is that correct?
Correct. The Biodesign Fellowship at UCLA Health. So it's a innovation hub of the hospital.
Okay. Was that a part of the MBA program or was that after the MBA program?
So that was part of, it was in the third year of its founding, this Biodesign Fellowship, and they did a collaboration with the engineering school and the business school where I was to take one person from each, including the hospital physicians, to make a team of 4. And so it was a cross-campus collaboration, if you will. And that's the whole ethos of biodesign, is bringing all the stakeholders into the innovation team. An engineer, someone with business industry experience, the physicians, and the nurses.
I think I told you this, but you're my second client that has met at this biodesign school. And my other client, they met at Stanford Biodesign, but very similar. They didn't know each other prior, and they had this idea and a problem to solve. And so I think that that's a huge shout out to the biodesign programs out there. But I forgot to mention, before we get into Vonova, Alexis would kill me if I didn't mention this. You are hands down our favorite client. Sorry for everyone else. And the reason for that is not just because of your sunny disposition and the fact that you're easy to work with. I also just think you are quite brilliant and motivated. And those two things, you're unstoppable, right? And so it's thrilling to be a part of a bus that is moving really fast, but also that has the wheels on it. I am very confident that whatever you get behind, you are going to succeed. And so it's really fun to be a part of it. I would love to be an investor at some point, because I know that with you and your co-founder at the helm, you guys are going to do great things. So I just wanted to give you a shout out. I don't say that to everyone. You can go back and rewind the tape. I've had a couple clients on. So every client's amazing, but honestly, your just level of brilliance and your commitment to solving this problem and also bringing in your background is inspiring. So I just wanted to let you know.
Oh, appreciate that.
All right. Well, let's talk about Vonova. And I know first, let's just share what that means, because I know that's the first interaction you and I had, is what it meant. And I also thought that was pretty cool.
Yes. Vonova means and translates to new hope, which is our mission. And over the years after Jose and I began collaborating, his whole origin story we'll get into was about addressing these large unmet clinical needs. And the reality for this patient population with neurological disorders on a whole, after medications fail, there's very little hope of a normal life. And that's really what we came down to in our brainstorming is, that's what we're about. We're about new hope. And actually, my wife, Rachel, kind of put the two together and was like, Von, which is Norse for hope, and Nova, which is Latin for new, and putting it together. So new hope.
By the way, shout out to Rachel, also brilliant. Perfect pairing between the two of them.
She's the user experience designer component, which is great. Actually something that's so needed in medical device. I can't tell you how many times a device is made with only asking 5 physicians what they think.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just had Alexis on a couple weeks ago, and we just published it yesterday, and we were just talking about that. And we were referencing, there was one client of all of our clients that really respects knowing what you're entering into and understanding the market and going beyond 5 people. And we didn't shout it out, but we were referencing you. So that you're mentioning that, it was you. Okay, cool. So Vonova, let's talk a little bit more on unique value proposition side, and also just your and Jose's idea and origin story. I know you mentioned that it came out of this biodesign conversation and providing new hope to these patients, but I know you have bigger plans on the horizon for Vonova, but I also just want to talk about the overall unique value. What are you replacing or eradicating that's currently in the medical pathway for these patients and also for future application patients?
Yeah, so core to our innovation and our value is the current archaic pathway to the brain surface, which is neurosurgery. So the only way to access the brain, the next frontier, probably the last frontier of our understanding of the human body, is to either drill, cut, open up your skull. And for many proven therapies for epilepsy, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, multiple neurological disorders, there's proven therapies, but there's this huge and very narrow bottleneck, which is the craniotomy. So our pathway, which leverages my experience in electrophysiology catheter development, using your body's venous system as a natural pathway and minimally invasive pathway to get access to the brain surface, all without the risk and discomfort of drilling through your skull.
I went back and looked at your investor deck, which, by the way, we were able to collaborate with you on, and I think it turned out really, really well.
Sure did.
But I went back and looked at some of the photos. At that point, I was just really focused on the branding and the overall look, and I wasn't really thinking about, the essence of the patient. But when I went back and looked at that one photo, I don't know what slide it's on, but where they show the patient with the open skull and all the nodes on it, it feels so archaic to me to have to do that for essentially just a diagnostic procedure.
Yeah.
And blows me away that that's still happening. And I think you had said that it's an option, but most people opt out because they don't want to go through that. And I don't blame them, especially if you're a child, which is a big part of the demographic for patients that are drug-resistant epilepsy. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So big things to come with Vonova. And I love the fact that you've got a background in the cardiac world that's synonymous with where you plan to take this space.
And
so
all credit to co-founder Dr. Jose Morales. He first witnessed this large unmet need, specifically in the drug-resistant epilepsy population, while in training at Northwestern for his neurology residency. And in this training, he observed exactly that. It's actually a colleague's child who had uncontrolled seizures. So when medications fail with this patient population, it's a seizure every day, and they're your child, and you don't know what to do. And the worst part is you don't know where the seizure is coming from. So there's unknown beyond unknown of where's it coming from? What can we do about it? And that's the bottleneck. It's the only way to figure out where is it coming from, the map, is to drill through your child's skull. And you can imagine, as a parent, you'll say, I'll take my chances, thanks, see you later. And therefore these patients grow up, and then once they're an adult, they'll finally have a surgery, but go through a decade of not being able to sit in the same classroom with the other kids, can't get a driver's license. So Jose witnessed all this and saw them drilling through skulls to place these electrodes to map the brain of seizure networks. And he said, man, there has got to be a better way. And he can definitely come on and give a better origin of that. But, with everything also coming up in the field, in the industry, from, like I mentioned, from cardiac electrophysiology catheters, advanced mapping systems from a catheter sensor, the advent of aneurysm coiling and all these neurovascular catheter solutions for thrombectomy as well coming out. And so you saw this convergence of catheter-based innovation across the body, not just the heart and the brain. And then you had the first publication from Synchron, Tom Moxley, which was showing the deployment of bioelectronic neural interface into the vein, which wasn't going to cover the whole brain to be a solution for epilepsy, but it was a step forward. So you see all these steps forward, and then Jose put it on paper and wrote a patent, and that patent is the foundation of Vonova today. This is going back to 2018. And we met in 2020 because he was looking for a catheter engineer. And it was just,
the title actually came into your favor.
Yeah, it worked out. But he was looking for an engineer to build his concept. And turns out I was an engineer plus aspiring entrepreneur, and wanted to be a leader in the field and drive change. And we dated for 2 years. He invited me to the lab. He's like, we're working with brains. And I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever. Such a cool transition for me from cardiac in my curiosity and my pursuit of growth and learning new fields. Jose taught me a lot about neurovascular. So over those 2 years, we really reduced the concepts or the idea into a concept and learned, wow, this is possible with the pioneer of catheter-based interventions in the brain, Dr. Gary Duckweiler, who's the current chief of neuroradiology at UCLA. He performed the first safety studies for the now standard aneurysm coil. So UCLA is like the place if you're going to do anything new with catheters in the brain. It is historically an innovation hub for that. And so really the right place at the right time. And I had just cared for my father with brain tumors. And I was also motivated to look at better solutions because for brain tumors, for example, you need a biopsy of that tumor. The only way is I had to sign it myself. I had to sign, you can drill through my father's skull to get a sample of tissue to diagnose.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with epilepsy, going through the skull to diagnose. There's got to be a better pathway. And so Jose and I, after getting this feasibility data in preclinical testing at UCLA, we formed the company, and I took the helm as the full-time CEO and president and co-founder. And been driving ever since, and it's going well. We're still here, and a lot of work ahead.
Well, I know you are still in your pre-commercial and kind of bootstrap phase of the startup, but I do want to understand a little bit more about the future of Vonova. I know you can't predict it. No one can, but I know that you have a vision for it. And so let's talk about where there are future applications beyond epilepsy, and just tell us what your vision is. If all the stars align, what does that look like?
Yeah. So, the best way to frame this is thinking of all the current reimbursed indications that require either a burr hole or a craniotomy. And those indications are growing. Some of the most standard ones are the treatments of these neurological disorders like Parkinson's with a stimulator, epilepsy with a stimulator, and the mapping of it, essential tremor, and drug delivery is on the rise. So there's this new solution in pharmaceuticals with the advent of biologic treatments, monoclonal antibodies, gene therapy, cell therapy, but they can't effectively get through the blood-brain barrier. That's because it's like fitting an elephant through a mouse hole. And they're doing all these chemical, tricks to try to enable that, electroporation, etc. But they're very inefficient. And so it's a chemical solution that is in need of a mechanical one. And that's, another opportunity for us, which is being a portal or path for drug delivery. And, you have to mention brain-computer interface. That's a bubble or a market that, some people say is here, it's here, it's here. We don't know. It's a crystal ball. There's no existing reimbursed market for it in the medical device space. But in the perspective or lens of a deep tech or the future of computer and human connection, Vonova is at the forefront of enabling that because, just as an analogy or historical reference, you go from typing on your keyboard, using a mouse. These are our, mechanical ways to communicate with the computer. And then we got the iPhone. We could do it while we're walking. We got 5G. We could do it anywhere. All these advancements are enhancing or enabling our communication and engagement with the computer and others. And then, I don't know if you tried it yet, the Apple Vision Pro. I really want to try it. So now
my son has the Oculus, which looks exactly like the Apple Vision Pro. But I did see a guy walking around Fashion Island in the food court with it on. And I'm like, this is scary. You're like completely checked out of the actual world you're living in.
Yeah. And it uses now your eyeballs, which are an extension of your brain, to communicate with a computer.
Yeah.
And so really Vonova, what we're enabling by delivering a neural interface from our new pathway is the ability to have a less invasive computer interface. And the applications are, abundant. I mean, there's, Synchron, Neuralink, they're focused on the communication as the core. So helping paralysis patients communicate as a core human function. But then for paralysis patients, movement. So control of neuroprosthetics, control of a vehicle, all of these human activities of daily living, if you will, could be augmented for those with various illnesses through a computer. And that computer needs its data, and those models need the data. And so really it's about how do you get high quality data from the brain without drilling through the skull. And that is an enabling pathway for the future of computer interface.
So not to get too far in the future, because obviously you can't really disclose everything that's in the master plan, but I kind of envision almost entering into this biowearable market, or maybe more like a pacemaker market, where you put some kind of an implant if you have a debilitating brain disease. We haven't even talked about that. So if I'm completely off base, just shut it down. But I could see, because you do have this vessel to deliver drugs, you could also deliver an implant or put something there that's readable, right? By a scan over the head. I don't know if that's a motivation, but it feels like because you have this ability to access the brain in a minimally invasive way, that the sky's the limit on applications.
It's a platform technology.
Right. Right.
And for those who are familiar with the field, there's a similar or analogous device for cardiac that expanded the market. There was only, I'm going to get the numbers totally right, but in 1999, there was less than 5,000, 10,000 cases for atrial fibrillation with a catheter. And then the transeptal approach came about. It's this unsung hero. So it's a catheter that goes through your leg and allows you to poke across the center of your heart so that you don't have to open your chest. So going from a standard of open chest surgery to now a catheter in the cardiac space allowed now for like Edwards to deliver a new heart valve through a catheter instead of through your chest, and to ablate and treat atrial fibrillation, clipping, like all of these solutions for the heart came downstream of the doorway, the pathway.
Right.
And so now, as us being the pathway to the brain surface, we can be that doorway.
And I feel like Vonova, was intended originally for this epilepsy patient and giving new hope to the parents and the family and the patient. But I think it's new hope to all future applications of the brain, right?
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm so drank the Kool-Aid of Vonova, and I do think there's just so much opportunity, and we're just scratching the surface. So I want to move on just a touch from Vonova and kind of talk about what is happening in this space as far as what you're seeing as a CEO, maybe around new technology and biowearables or anything that you're kind of interested in. I just want to know, within the medtech space and the startup space, some things that you think are going to become mainstream in the future.
The first part, definitely a shout out to, Synchron and Neuralink for really pioneering this, the advancements of the models and the hardware around the computer interface. I think it was last month, Neuralink had, phenomenal, clinical test with a human interfacing with computer games and doing so much. So that's just fascinating. That's, we're on our way to the Mars, right? But closer to Earth right now, I'm really impressed with neurorehabilitation technologies, Neurolutions. Leo has a great technology helping post-stroke patients that have lost ability to fully command their dexterity with their hands. Mm-hmm. And once they plateau in their rehabilitation after having a stroke, that impacts their motor skills. They communicate through a non-invasive headset to a neuroprosthetic to help move their hands and retrain those fibers, essentially. And so neurorehabilitation, neuroprosthetics, that's definitely the future. And on the neurorehabilitation, there's definitely opportunities for our technology to enhance that. Because again, I don't think we've touched on it yet, but non-invasive scalp EEGs, so what we're saying is, you have your skin or your scalp, you got your bone of your skull, and then you have this layer called the dura, which is like the sac of the brain, and then you have the brain. So got a few layers here. But the most critical layer for signal acquisition is the bone. It's like insulation. It doesn't allow like electrical activity to fully transmit through it. And so because of that, you're going to get weaker signal or weaker data outside of the skull from these scalp electrodes, even from non-invasive imaging, most of them. And therefore, just the physics of it requires you to get sensors directly on or into the brain. And so for these technologies, that have a foundation today, the future to enhance their capability is to get data from Vonova. And so it's really all about, as always, all about the data.
Yeah. I think we talked about that early on, when I referenced the intuitive playbook and how they were successful in launching what at one time was considered a marketing gimmick, which was now the Da Vinci robot. And I think the reason why they were able to scale and get past any of the naysayers and really cross the chasm was data. And if you have data to support any product that you're launching, you're 9 times out of 10 going to succeed. And I think everything follows data, especially in this medtech space. So while I have huge hopes for Vonova, I'm thrilled to be a part of this journey. And I know this is just the beginning. So I do want to talk about an opportunity just to teach others. So our audience is primarily made up of people in the med device industry, med tech executives, or even people like yourself that are med tech CEOs of startups. And I know you've referenced that this is kind of a new role for you, but I do want to bring out some of best practices. I want to know, when you reflect on the beginning of this journey for yourself, what are some of the things that you learned along the way that if you could tell your former self to do or not to do, what would that be? And I want to make sure that we're passing that on to our audience.
I think it goes without saying sometimes, but I have to reiterate. Number one is persistence. Mm-hmm. There's going to be times where things are going well, things are going bad, and you don't have necessarily the paycheck at the end of the day to make you feel good enough, right? And so there will be doubt, there will be, roadblocks. They're just bumps in the road. Mm-hmm. And so persistence is number one.
Okay.
Number two, really focus on bringing in as much talent, advisors, advice as you can possibly talk to. Just talk to them. And, everything's a grain of salt, but there's so much experience out there that, it's impossible for an individual or a leader to have. So you're going to be making decisions daily. 10, 15 decisions a day, more. So, having a good Rolodex, if you will, of people in network that you trust you, that you've developed a relationship with over time that you can call upon when needed. It's critical. We wouldn't be here today if it weren't for our community.
Yeah. I actually think that's something you do quite well. And, this is really to existing clients of ours, but also future clients of ours. It's never too soon to start your brand. And I think our tagline for Tribe is to make your brand a verb. And I actually think you've been living that life predating our meeting and have continued that. You're always out on the circuit. You're always not so much doing press, but in conferences and meeting people and speaking about your mission and vision and really putting yourself out there. And I think when you're a startup, you don't have the luxury of delegating that to other people or just waiting for your commercialization plan to be activated or through some marketing team. They want to hear from you. They want to hear from the founders and Jose. They want to know the essence, the mission, the vision, that there's real people behind it and why they should invest in that and invest their time and follow you. And I think you've done a really good job of making your brand a verb, even early days pre-commercial. So, I think that's everything that you just described. It's really leaning in and being the poster child to your brand right now. You don't delegate much. So I think that's why
we're working towards that.
Well, you know what? I think it's made you a household name, amongst this community because you've done the work and you've also listened to the wisdom of others. So I applaud you for that.
I'll also add to that it's really about always pursuing and understanding your why. Sinek puts it very well, start with your why. But that goes with like all discussions, all relationships, like everybody's got a why.
Yeah.
Most people, good people with integrity, your whys will align. It's like who's not going to align with trying to change the world and help millions of patients? Most people are in for that. So, if you're, what you're doing and that is what it is, you can really build a great support. And I just feel very fortunate, privileged to have that support today because it is a great mission and you're not going to get there alone.
I agree. And like I said, I feel like I'm just continually telling you how great you are, but not the intention, but I just sincerely mean that. I also think you're very humble. And, people in your position aren't always, and they're not necessarily open to outside information. And I think that you come to everything with a level of curiosity. And I think that that's what is going to make you and this company great. Okay, so we're going to wrap, but I do have to ask you 3 key questions. And we kind of do it in a speed round that I ask every guest speaker. And I've actually added a bonus question just for you. 10th episode. And we'll see how it lands. And if not, then I won't continue it. But the top 3 that I ask everyone, 1, who is a mentor that you'd like to pay it forward to? I know you'd mentioned someone earlier, Dave, but if it's not him and you want to talk about someone else, I want to know a mentor that's made an impact on you. I want to know a favorite business book or a book that's made an impact on you. And then also what your superpower is. And then I'll tell you what the 4th bingo question is here in a minute.
All right. I think I got all those.
Okay. I'll say them again if you don't remember.
Okay.
Starting with the mentor.
Okay. Yeah. So, I did mention Dave Bringle. However, I'd like to make a special shout out to Randy Werniff. He was the founder of the first and only companies I worked at. Ablation Frontiers, acquired by Medtronic, Acutus Medical, exit IPO. And Randy has been a mentor. I wouldn't say father, more like a godfather. It's like there, but you're on your own. And, he's shown me and was really an initial inspiration for me as an engineer, wanting to drive change. And that's what he did at his company. He was an engineer that had the persistence and tenacity to build great companies, build great teams and communities in those companies, all aligned with integrity to get good quality devices to patients. And so
that's great.
I take it as a responsibility to carry that forward. And so thank you to Randy for setting that stage.
I'm sure he'd be really proud of what you've been able to accomplish post Randy. All right. What about a book? And I know you're probably going to go down the engineering rabbit hole, but that's fine. We have a lot of audience members that are engineers, but I have a ton of books on my shelf that I reference often. So what's the one that just comes to mind that made the biggest impact on you?
To date, I would say The Hard Things About Hard Things. It's a great synopsis about the entrepreneurial journey as a leader and doing what's best for the company. And what that means isn't what's best for profits, what's best for revenue, I'll make sure for investors. But the company is a community, the company are its people. And that's the hard thing about hard things.
I love that. I'm definitely going to read that. I'm in the middle of a book series right now. Atomic Habits, The Big Leap, and next week I'm reading The 4-Hour Work Week. So I'll add the hard things about the hard things to my book club. All right. And then the last one is superpower. I'm really curious to see what you say. I think you have many, but what is the one thing that is just supernatural to you and you feel you bring to the table above and beyond everything else?
I think, I can build trust with people well. And I think that's been very important is in my career.
I think the term never met a stranger. You're just a very disarming person and you have an immediate ability to make people feel comfortable, which is huge as a CEO. That's a massive quality. And that will serve you so well because you're at the helm dealing with so many different types of personalities and you really have to be a chameleon to all of them. So I think that's a huge superpower. Okay. The last question that's a bonus question. And then we'll part ways. For some reason, I was thinking about it the other day. I'm like, I need to ask my guest speakers this question because I'm curious about it. So what was your first job and how old were you when you got it? It's more probably for my kids to hear. They're 20-year-old twins in college right now. But most people had their first job and it was, at an early age and it was kind of a funny story. So what was yours?
Well, I guess the funny story is my first job was picking weeds all summer because I crashed a scooter into someone's car.
Whoops.
And I had to pay for the repairs. But I learned a lot from that. But yeah, my first real job, I guess, was in high school. I was a server, I was a waiter in a retirement home, 5-star, I will say.
Wow.
I had to move on from that job because I spilled red wine on a woman's white cashmere sweater on accident. But that's how I got my start. And that was, I was in the facility of people at the end of their time. And I love talking with them. I love to learn from them. And it's kind of how I started my interest in, just really my core is care for people.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I have a close family member that's about to enter into that community, like a senior assisted living or something to that effect. And I have a little reservation around it because there's been so many stigmas, but I think hopefully it's evolved and it's becoming more and more common to live kind of the back end of your life and especially in Newport Beach, they have amazing facilities here. Yeah. They're like literally the Ritz-Carlton. Yeah. All right. Well, Wesley, I know you have a ton on your plate today and going forward this weekend and next week. And I appreciate your time coming on to Leadr podcast. I also just appreciate you as a person and I'm thrilled that we were able to align with Tribe and Vonova. And I wish you all the best. And again, thank you for being on today. And thank you to the listeners. If you're still with us, we appreciate it. If you want to get a hold of Wesley, you can reach him on vonova.io. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Or on LinkedIn. Both of us are on LinkedIn. So feel free to reach out to him. I'm sure he'd be happy to hear from you. All right. With that, thank you.